Star Wars 7x7 episode 2497. Today, let's talk about the big debut from yesterday on May the 4th day. It was the premiere of the new Bad Batch series. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. Thank you so much for joining me for it. So, May the 4th has come and gone, and with it we have the premiere of the latest bit of Star Wars storytelling. It's going to be more than just a bit of storytelling. It's the 70-minute premiere of The Bad Batch. Now, if you haven't seen it yet, this episode of the podcast is going to be mostly spoiler-free. There may be a couple of mild things, but as I shared on Twitter, there was a tweet about the Bad Batch where they talked about surprises and whatnot, and yes, there are definitely surprises in the Bad Batch for sure, and we will talk about them in due course, but I figure, yeah, maybe we just keep it a little bit light and do a mostly non-spoiler review on this episode. Now, the good news is that as far as the Bad Batch goes, the episode doesn't have to spend a lot of time telling us about these characters because we've already met them. Of course, they had that 4-episode arc in season 7 of the Clone Wars, so they've been established and they are introduced to us in a way that it's a very exciting, and I saw one report previously that talked about a cinematic opening for the show, and I would definitely agree it is very much like that. But rather than being introduced to the Bad Batch, you're reintroduced to them the way that it's done in this first episode of the series. And I think that's definitely a great way to handle it. Chances are, if you are into the whole Bad Batch situation, then you're probably familiar with them in the animation. And if not, then it kind of helps that their names are, very much aligned with their particular set of skills. With the possible exception of Echo, I suppose, because he, of course, is not an original member of the Bad Batch. He is an adopted one. And that particular fact does kind of come into play in a very sly way in this episode. But the biggest job of this episode has kind of been telegraphed by all the PR materials that we've gotten leading up to this. In particular, talking about how the Bad Batch is going to be learning in this series to survive in a post-Order 66 world. So the last time that we saw them, it was pre-Order 66, and so it raises the question, how did they survive the events of Order 66? And so this episode's job is basically to tell us that. It's called Aftermath. That's the name of the episode. And we did see elements of this post-Order 66 situation where in trailers and stuff, we see the Bad Batch along with other clone troopers listening to the Palpatine monologue about reorganizing the Republic into the First Galactic Empire. So we know that transition happens, and it's just a matter of how it happens. And the whole thing with the clones, and maybe you don't know, so if you know, then don't worry, I'll make this real quick, and if you don't know, I'll keep it real simple. The clones have an inhibitor chip in their heads, and it's basically meant to make them more docile in terms of responsive to instructions and following orders and whatnot. You will hear the good soldiers follow orders repeated every so often. That happened when Fives' inhibitor chip went screwy and haywire back in season 6 of the Clone Wars Lost Missions. So that inhibitor chip is also programmed with the whole Order 66 switch flip. So the big question going into this season premiere was whether the genetic mutations, the desirable and apparently also the encouraged genetic mutations, it turns out that once they realized that these genetic mutations were happening and desirable, the Kaminoans actually helped them along and kind of enhanced them even more. Would these genetic mutations actually have an effect on the inhibitor chips that were installed with them? Well, that answer is given, and it is not a unanimously applied answer. Let's put it that way. And until we get to spoiler conversations on a future episode, I'll leave it at that. But I will say that I found the answer to be very satisfying and adds intrigue as we continue on into however long this season is going to be. Then, of course, we also have the introduction of the character Omega in the show, and her character is definitely explained to enough of a degree where it makes sense that she is a part of this, but as to what role she's really going to serve, well, that remains to be seen, and it's done in a very satisfying way, I felt at least. I'm pleased to see this character being involved with the Bad Batch, and I'm very curious to see what is going to come of her partnering with these nothing but trouble characters. And it seems like there's going to be a little bit of political intrigue to some degree too. We're going to dig into clones versus regular troopers and all sorts of other fascinating things. And this is just the tip of the iceberg right now. So I think they actually kicked it off with a fantastic start, and I'd love to hear what you thought about the premiere of The Bad Batch 2. So please chime in wherever you catch this episode or wherever you catch a conversation about this episode beginning, either on Facebook or Twitter or on YouTube or even at home base for the show at sw7x7.com. And that is going to do it for the non-spoiler review and conversation about the premiere of The Bad Batch, and we will dig in subsequent episodes. But for now, that's going to do it for today's episode of the show. It just remains for me to say that I hope you had a wonderful May the 4th, and thank you so much for joining me for this episode as always, and may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.